appraisal is the first one is in regards to determining the ceiling cost of development. Okay, the second one would be to minimize the risk and uncertainty. Once the project has been completed, it will be influenced by different sets of risk factors. For example, we can see that the project will be influenced by the general economic conditions, probably the pandemic situation, as well as the rising cost of construction, for example. So these are the types of uncertainty that will influence our development project in the future. So that's why you need to calculate, or you have to estimate the levels of viability for the certain development project. Okay, the third one is in regards to to estimate the levels of profit to developers. So the aims of development appraisal is generally to identify whether the project is viable in the context of financial feasibility. So as far as concerned, once we have estimate the developer's profit, we can indirectly identify whether the project is viable in the context of return on investment. So as far as what we have already looked last week, the return on investment for ratio from GDV is between 15 to 25 and above, while for TDC is in between 20% to 50% and above, which is in regards to the return on investment. So as for today, I would like to talk about the differences between gross development value and total development cost in construction. And all of these items will be explained within this slide. Okay, semua dah ada lah. So far, everyone is here. So we have around 31 students, so it is a good attendance. Okay, let me present or share with you the slide. Okay. So, can everyone see the slide? Nampak tak?
Nampak, sir.
Okay, nampak. Okay, nampak. Okay, now as far as concerned, when we conduct the development appraisal for development project, one of the very crucial tasks that we need to do is in regards to finding out the items in GDV and gross development cost or total development cost. Why? It is because the GDV and total development will determine our levels of profit. Let's say if you are estimating or you are finding out the items in GDV and total development costs that is not accurate, they are not accurate as possible, generally it will influence your levels of profit when you conduct the development appraisal. That's why it is important for you to search for a very, I think, accurate and reasonable amount of cost and item amount within the GDV and TDC. Okay, I believe you have already done your residual methods or residual valuation in semester 2 and 3. So this is, I believe, is part of the revision. So this is one of the revision that we can conduct to identify what are the items within the development project. Okay, firstly, let us look into the GDV, gross development value. What constitute a GDV? So GDV is the actual amount. So if you refer to this slide, it is eventually an actual amount of income in which the development can fetch when disposing of the property after completion. Okay, for a project that built for leasing, the GDV is calculated from capitalization net rental, net income time years purchase, capital value or GDV, so expected rental and investment yield. So in simple terms, so we can estimate the GDV in two forms. First, from the sales of the development project. So how do we calculate the GDV from sales? Is by outright multiplying the total number of unit and also the pricing for each of the unit of the property that we are going to sell after the project completed. So if you refer to this slide, number of unit times sales price per unit, and then we can simply estimate the total gross development value of the product or the property. Okay, another one. This one is different from the GDV from sales, whereby we are calculating based on the rental. So from rental, we could also estimate the GDV by searching or by estimating the net income or net rental, and then we multiply it with the years purchased in perpetuity, for example, and percentage, years purchased at interest rate, for example, and then the last or the final amount would be the capital value, or we can simply relate it to the gross development value. So you should remember we could calculate it based on sales price, and also we can also get the GDV from the leasing of property or the rental. So the next slide shows the GDV from sales. So as you can scrutinize here, so GDV is the outright sales of the project. So let's say if we have a service apartment, so the sales price is per square feet basis, and then you multiply with the GFA or the, of course, in this context of residential, you multiply with the GFA, gross floor area, and then you will get the sales price per unit. And finally, you will get the total amount of selling price for service apartment. And then for retail shop, and also for the parking lot. So the final amount of GDP would be the total up or the sum up of all of the sales, total sales of each product. So in this example, you will get around 103.6 million GDV from sales. Okay, the second one would be the example in which we can derive GDV from leasing of commercial property, for example, office building. So as you can view here, so the calculation is quite complex as to compare with the GDV from sales, because to derive the net rentals of the property, you should minus different item. You should minus and then you should multiply different types of item. For example, there are also a few steps that you need to be taken before you come out with the GDV from rental. So for example, let's say this is a purpose-built office. So we have a certain types of level. So you can see here, you need to search for the unit gross floor area, and then you have to allocate for the common area, and then finally you should get the net lettable area for these types of building. And then you should also collect the data on the gross rental. Okay, since our building is not completed yet, so you can compare the gross rental from the surrounding types of building, similar types of buildings. So let's say the project or the comparable property could get gross rental around 8 ringgit, 3 to 8 ringgit. So you can include it inside your calculation. And then you have to minus the gross rental with the service charge, because within a certain building, within a building such as the office building and service apartment, for example, they are allocation for service charge. So you have to minus with the gross rental to get net gross rental without service charge. So you can see here, 8 ringgit minus 2 ringgit. So the final answer would be the gross rental without the service charge. Okay, and then you have to total up the gross rental, or you have to multiply with net lettable area with the gross rental without service charge, and then you will get total gross rent per month. So these are all the gross rental per month. And then you have to include another item, which is on the occupancy rate. Of course, within a building, you cannot, it is, I think generally it is hard to achieve 100% occupancy rate. I think the best occupancy rate for current term is between 70 to 85%. I think and it is made worse after the pandemic. So when we look into the data, the occupancy rate has been reduced because of most of the people tends to work from home because of the PKP, PKPD, and etc. So you have to do your own assumption on the occupancy rate based on the current situation and also based on the market data. And then you multiply with the total gross rent and occupancy rate. So you will get the total gross rent realistically, and then you total up, you multiply with 12 months because we want to obtain the gross rent for per annum basis. And then you have to minus the outgoings. So outgoing normally we will have to assume between 15 to 25%. So in this context, I'm adopting about 20% from the total gross rental per annum. So you will get around 2.753 million. And then, so we will get the net rental below here because, so if you see within this calculation, I forgot to include it, the net rental. So actually it should be a net rental per annum. And then you have to multiply with years purchase in perpetuity at 9%, 11.11. And last but not least, you will get the total GDV items from rental around 30.6 million. So as you can see here, it is a quite complex calculation for GDV from rental. And then it involves many types of data. For example, gross rental, or you need to have the gross floor area, you have to come up with the common area, and then you have to check with the gross rental, service charge, occupancy rate, and also the outgoing. So as to compare with the GDV from sales, so it is quite complex calculation, especially in the context of GDV from rental. So later on, I will give you some of the example that some of the exercises that we can do uh, in your during your free time. So from GDV from sales and also GDV from rental. Okay, next. So apart from the gross development value in a certain development project, we also need to estimate the cost, cost involved or the capital spent for the investment within the project. So as far as concerned, some of the project can involve a small amount of cost, small amount of money, but others may involve a very substantial amount of money. For example, like building construction costs, it is one of the very high costs involved within the construction project. Okay, let us look into the certain types of costs that involved within the development project. Okay, the first one would be on the site preliminaries. Okay, site preliminaries, if you read here, is comprise the initial payment or costs involved prior to the construction, whereby it needs to be paid to the consultant for services such as feasibility study, planning and development, layout plan, and others. And some of it we need to pay to the local authorities, and then we have to pay some of the contribution to the Syabas, and then pejabat tanah. You have to pay some of the money to the bomber, fire service department, TMB, and etc. So in this context, there are different types of calculation for site preliminaries, but you can also do it in terms of lump sum estimation between 30,000 to 100,000 per acre. So for the academic purpose, we can do it in terms of lump sum lah. For example, you calculate based on the per acre basis, 30,000 to 100,000 per acre. Okay, so the next one would be on the statutory charges. So statutory charges related to the charges that involve or has been specified within the Act. For example, for the first one would be the conversion premium. So where we would pay for the conversion premium. So we have to pay to the state government conversion premium or the PTG. Okay, as far as concerned, within the rule number 11A Selangor Land Rules 2003, so you have to pay the premium rate. Let's say if you want to convert your site from agriculture to residential, for example. So you have to pay 15% amount from the converted market value, not the agriculture land value, but the converted market value of land. So if you read here, all the above are based on the valuation of land that you wish to be converted, not the original land valuation rate, meaning 50% from the converted market value of land. So you have to pay between 15% to 30% of the premium rate. So you can also Google, you open up your Google and then you search for tukar syarat tanah. So within the document, you can see several of the procedures, payment, and also the premium payment that has been imposed on the site. So let's say if you want to change your site from agriculture to industry, you have to pay between 20% to 30% depending on types of project ataupun or type of industrial, small, medium industry, heavy industry. Okay, let's say if you want to convert your land from residential to commercial, you have to pay around 50%. So you can, or you have to refer to the premium rate has been given by the government, by the Selangor government, Selangor Land Rules 2003. Okay, B, the next one would be drainage and irrigation. So prior to the construction of the project, you have to pay contribution to the Department of Irrigation and Drainage, about 6,000 per acres. Okay, C, you have to pay also the Tenaga Nasional contribution in a form of connection fee for metering. So I am purposely not included the items, so you have to search for it. How much do we have to pay for per unit of property, connection fee for metering. Okay, D, Sabah's contribution. Okay, as far as concerned, so within this contribution, you have to follow the capital contribution rates within the Water Service Industry Act 2006. Okay, thankfully, I have searched the cost for you. Okay, this one. Contribution for water supply in a form of residential project. So these are the types of project or types of property, and then you have to pay based on the types of project. Okay, rumah flat cost rendah, sederhana rendah, sederhana. So you have to pay around 75 ringgit per unit. So all of these costs are based on the per unit basis. Okay, let's say if you want to do a commercial project, so how much you will have to pay? Okay, for example, pejabat office, so you have to pay 1,000 or 0.18 times anggaran permintaan air atau mengikut mana-mana yang lebih tinggi. So in this context, you have to estimate two types of calculation. One-on-one calculation in which you have to identify or you have to estimate 0.18 times total demand for water based on per unit premise. And then you compare both. Whichever is higher, you put it inside your calculation. 1,000 or this one. So this one is either or, which one is higher. So you have to follow this act. You have to follow this contribution scale within your calculation. Let's say if you want to conduct the feasibility study within your assignment, you have to estimate the residual method calculation. So you have to put this scale based on your proposed project. Okay, that one is for Shabazz contribution. Okay, and then E is for IWK contribution. And what is IWK? Indah Water. So in regards to the Indah Water, in accordance to Water Services Industry Sewerage Capital Contribution Fund, so the rate imposed is 1% of the GDV. So it is a very clear-cut calculation. So you have to take 1% from the GDV as your IWK contribution. Okay, for F, subdivision and titles. Okay, for example, let's say you have one title of site. For the site is one title, you have to do a subdivision. Subdivision because you need to separate the site into several lot. Lot which in which with individual title. So in this context, you have to pay several fees in accordance to the rules, Langor Land Rules 2003. Registration and issue of qualified title are as follow. So you have to pay RM 50 ringgit per title. So let's say you have 100 units of houses. So 100 times 50 ringgit. So you have to pay. Okay, land survey fees for industrial is estimated at 950. So this is one of the example that has been conducted, a real project. So you have to pay land survey fee for industrial is estimated at 950 per unit. So when you total up with the cost of 50 ringgit, so you will get around 1,000 per unit for subdivision and title. So I think this is title survey fee. Latest one, the latest one. So you have to pay the basic payment of basic fee of around 1,000 1,000 ringgit for title survey fees. In total, maybe it's around 1,000 to 1,050 ringgit per unit or per title. So you have to pay. Okay, the third one would be on the site preparation, work and infrastructure. So prior to the site preparation, we have a preliminary costs. So let us look back. So the preliminary costs involve the site preliminaries and statutory charges. Okay, the next one would be on the site preparation, work and infrastructure. Once you have paid for all the contribution to the authorities and preliminaries, you will start with your site preparation cost, site preparation works. So site preparation includes the site clearance, work and infrastructure, whereby it is a cost that involved when you are preparing the site for development. Okay, for site preparation, normally the cost involved is in regards to the demolition, or you clear the site from any debris, vegetation, or probably there are some of the abandoned buildings, incomplete buildings, large trees, for example. And then another site preparation work is cut and fill. So for example, if the site is undulating in terrain, so you have to make it a flat types of site using or via the cut and fill method. Okay, this is one of the site preparation work that has been need to be conducted before we proceed with our building construction. So the cost is between 10,000 to 35,000 per acre. Okay, this is just a rough estimation on the site preparation. Okay, the second one would be on the infrastructure. Let's say if you are doing the development for any types of project, residential, commercial, industrial, so you need to have an infrastructure. So it is a very important aspects of development because you need all this infrastructure to power up or to give drainage, for example, to your project. Okay, the first one would be roads and drain. So the assumption or the calculation is between per unit basis. So you have to find out yourself on the each of the costs. I am purposely leave it blank here because it will become part of your task as this week. So your roads and drain needs to be prepared and then need to be paid based on per unit basis. Also with the IWK, sewerage and infrastructure, you can do a calculation on how many numbers of person that will reside within your development project. Okay, see, for electrical substation needs to be prepared by the developers within the project itself. So the latest one I have checked, we have two types of substation, which is on the conventional or the compact one. So the costs are also different between both types of substation. Okay, and then on the aspects of telecommunication, you need to prepare the wiring, internet access, cabling, and etc. for telecommunication. So it is also between RM certain numbers per unit. So you calculate based on per unit of project of the product of the property. Okay, so you also need to prepare for the water piping and also the water tank. Let's say your project requires 2 water tanks, so you have to provide, and the cost need to be paid based on per unit is for water piping, and for water tank also per unit basis. Okay, last but not least, your project needs a common places. Okay, let's say you need to construct a surau. So surau is based on per unit basis. So you can simply put it within your residual methods of calculation. Okay, next one, number 4. So once you have laid out all the site preparation, laid out all the infrastructure, so the next task would be on the construction of the project. So the item involved within the construction is the building construction cost. The first one is the building construction cost. So the question here, how do you get the cost for building? So the cost is estimated based on the contractor or quantity surveyor. So nowadays it is very easy to get this cost because you can get it from the published materials or resource, especially or for example from the Arcadis. So you open up your Google and then you type Arcadis and automatically it will generate all sort of searches, and you have to find or download the construction cost handbook. Okay, these are the example. Let me show you the example of construction cost handbook. So why it is a very important handbook? Because you need to extract the data on cost for each of types of building based on your project. Okay, so if you look into the construction cost handbook, there are some part of the book that shows the construction cost for detached house, terrace house, luxury apartment, low cost housing. Okay, for example, we look into the range of construction cost for terrace houses. So terrace houses shows a range of between 705 to 1,135 ringgit per meter square. So in this regard, so you have to you have to find out what is the suitable range of costs for the proposed project. So within 700 to 1135 ringgit per meter square. Of course, when you conduct your residual methods of calculation, to simplify your calculation, you can also convert this cost into per square feet basis. So do you know how to convert into square feet basis? So normally we divide it with the conversion amount 10.764. Okay, let me take my calculator. Okay, for example, 0.05 divide by 10.76764. So you will get around 66 ringgit per square feet. This one is the calculation, I think, is for the low cost housing, basic or basic spec of terrace houses. So the highest spec would be on the 1135 square feet per meter square, or in per square feet, you have to convert it. Okay, let us look into the cost for commercial, for example. So average standard offices high rise is between 148,480 to 1935. Okay, prestige office is higher than the average standard because of the quality of the materials is of course better than the average standard offices. Okay, and then we have the shopping centers is between 1945 to 2765. So we can use this as our basis within the calculation in residual method. Okay, so within this construction handbook, you can also view other types of project costing. Okay, the next one would be on M&E, mechanical and electrical costs. So we can simply take the cost for mechanical services, electrical services, hydraulic services, fire services, lift and escalators, with and put it inside our residual calculation. So it is mostly a projected cost because our project has not yet been completed. So all the costs that's been taken is considered as the projected cost, as the what we call it as the closest as it can get for our project. Okay, the next one. Okay, do you have any question on building construction costs? Because last Tuesday, some of your friend asked me whether the cost is updated yearly. Yes. So the construction cost handbook will be updated yearly. It is an open source that you can simply download it from the Google and search it. It's very easy nowadays. Okay, next would be on the professional fees. Of course, you need to pay the professional fees because they are the one that involve. There are many types of professionals that involve within the construction. For example, you need to pay for the town planner, architect, engineers, land surveyor, and QS, quantity surveyors. For the academic purpose, we can assume that the cost is between 6% to 10% from the total cost of preliminaries, site clearance, earthwork, and building costs. Why? Because all these types of work involve these professionals. Extensively use the services of these professionals. So it is between 6% to 10% of the total cost specified within the slide. Okay, the number 6, advertising, agency, and legal fees. So this is also part of the very significant cost that we need to allocate within a certain development project, because normally advertising will be conducted prior to the start of the project, at the launching stage. And then the advertising need to be conducted at the end of the project period, whereby after the project completed, the developer will do certain advertising to promote their product, to promote their unsold properties again. Okay, so this include the cost of advertising, agency, and legal fees. Advertising and agency fees would include agency fees. And why do we need real estate agent? Because some of the project employ the estate agencies firm to ensure that their property is marketed, because agency has the specialties, has the skills, and then has the knowledge on the market to sell the developers project. Okay, some of the developers will employ the exclusive agent. Okay, and then you need to pay also for the marketing brochures, advertising in newspapers, and also others, website advertising. Probably they will advertise their project in YouTube, for example. Okay, and then the developer have to pay for the legal fees, for the sales and purchase agreement between developer and purchaser. So the range of costs for advertising and agency fee, we can say we can allocate around 3% to 5% from GDV, from gross development value. Okay, number 7. Of course, we need to employ project managers, project managers for the developers project. So among the tasks that involve within the project management is the overall planning. So they need to conduct the planning of the project, and then they have to control and coordinate a project from inception until completion. And then they have to meet the client requirement and ensuring completion on time. So it is a very crucial task on the project management part, whereby they need to ensure the project runs smoothly without any problems and also achieve expected quality standard. So these are the calculation. Minimum fee for the project management service is 3.5% from the total gross development cost, or the total development cost. So between is the minimum is 3.5. So depend on the complexity of the project, it can also goes into 5%, 6%, and etc. Okay, another part that is quite important within development costs or construction is regarding the bridging finance. So what is bridging finance in construction? Okay, bridging finance is an interim financing used to maintain liquidity. So some of the developer need to have cash at hand to pay for the construction cost. So what they can do is that they will approach the bank that willing to give them a loan or money to conduct the project, and then they will pay all the construction costs using the bridging finance. Because during the construction, the developer will not get any income, will not get any return since the building has not been completed yet. And then given by the bank, so the finance or the money obtained can be used to finance all the costs that involve within the construction period. And then that way the developer will ensure that inflow of cash are not cut off lah, tak terputus. The inflow of cash is there within the project. So the loan usually has a higher interest rate. Why we have a higher interest rate? Because since the development project is very risky project, the developer, some of the bank are not willing to finance the project. So the willing bank will give a higher interest rate to compensate for the uncertainty. So if you check your interest rate, it is not similar to the conventional interest rate. You have to look the interest rate in the development bank, for example. In Malaysia, we have development bank. So you have to check your interest rate at the development bank. How much will they give to the developer? Okay, and then the period of financing is also shorter, meaning you need to pay within the project period. For example, 2 years. The developer has to pay the project finance within 2 years. So you have to make sure, so the developer have to make sure the inflow of project are able to pay the financing. Okay, next, for bridging finance, we have two types. It depends on the types of project also. First one, we have a build then sell project. Okay, the second one would be the sell then build project. So build then sell project is not as popular as the sell then build, but it exists within the development of the property. So build then sell, you have to calculate based on the full cost and half period. So using amount of $1, so you take the full cost of the construction times 1 plus I% interest rate given by the development bank to the power of half period. So let's say your project is 2 years. So you substitute N with the 2 years period. So you will get the 1 year period minus principal. So we only have to calculate for the interest. That's why you need to minus 1, whereby it represents the principal amount. So the final answer would be the interest payable to development bank. Okay, this is for the build and sell. The next one would be for the sell then build. So the principal is the half cost and full period. So take the total cost of the construction, and then you divide by 2, you will get the half cost. Why half cost? Why do we have to calculate the half cost for the construction or the principal amount of payment? So the reason is because the developer able to generate money from the buyer. So the buyer have to pay first based on the progress billing. I think the developer or the buyer need to pay for the deposit, for example, deposit, and then they have to pay for the progress payment or progress billing within the construction period. So that's why the developer will borrow about half of the amount of cost for the sell then build project. And then you multiply with the amount of $1 or the interest payment, 1 plus I% to the power of full period. As to compare with the build and sell, the sell then build is estimated at full period of the development. So if the development period is 2 years, so you substitute the n into 2 years period. 1 plus I% to the power of 2 minus 1. So you have to minus for the principal, and then the final answer would be the interest of payment to the bank. So you need to remember, because some of the question in examination or assessment will ask for you to estimate the build then sell or sell then build. So don't mix up between both types of project. This one is for bridging finance. Okay, the second one would be on the letting period. So what is letting period? Okay, period requires searching for a tenant. So letting period finance is not suitable for any types of project that are not leasing to tenant. It is only suitable for project that the aims of the project is to lease to potential tenant. So that's why you need to look into the letting period. So after the building completed, let's say you are constructing a purpose-built office. So once the project completed, you need to allocate certain period of time to find a tenant. So it is not easy as once you completed the project, the tenant will come and rent your project, rent your property as fast as they can. But you have to take, or you have to allocate certain period of time to find a tenant. So within that particular period, the developer or the property owner needs to bear the cost, bear the cost of, for example, management, maintenance, insurance, repair. So it is, sometimes it can be a quite substantial cost. So at that point of time, or at that point of particular case, you can go to the bank and ask them for the letting period finance. So the calculation of the letting period finance, okay, full cost or half cost. So depend on your construction costs, either STB or the sell then build, STB, sell then build, or build then sell, BTS. So full cost or half cost plus YY. YY is the interest that you have obtained previously in bridging finance, this one. So you plus with your total full cost or half cost, and then you multiply with amount of $1 to the power of letting period. So letting period normally we assume about 6 months, half year. So you substitute the n into 0.5, and then you minus 1. So the total interest that you need to pay to the bank is the amount of letting period generated from this calculation. So it is a quite beneficial to the property that needs to be leasing out to potential tenant. So they can cover all the costs that involve. So remember, it is 6 months. We assume around 6 months for letting period. Okay, the number 9, contingencies fund is the fund that we need to allocate for a certain project. Why? So as the name shows, contingencies is the dana kecemasan, or in BM is dana kecemasan, are allowed for unforeseen circumstances like delay in construction work, changes of layout and design, finishes, weather disruption, rise in manpower usage, and increase in price of construction material. So it used to cover any uncertainties or any circumstances. Okay, for instance, currently we are facing the pandemic COVID-19. It affect the construction project, whereby for example, like the manpower. So the manpower cannot work, the labor cannot go to the site. because of COVID-19 and etc. So you can use this contingency fund to finance these uncertainties. So as far as concerned, the cost is between 3% to 5% of the total cost from the site clearance, work, building costs, and professional fees. So it depends on the types of the project. So higher or complex is the project, higher is the contingencies fund to be allocated. Okay, so far okay.
Okay, Doktor.
Okay, okay, so far so good. Okay, last but not least is the land related cost. Apart from the construction cost, preliminaries, and etc., you need to allocate for land. Why? Why do we need to allocate for land? So land is one of the factors of production within the economics. For example, land is the factors of production. So you cannot develop or you cannot produce a product without the land. So the developer has to acquire a suitable land for the proposed project, and then they have to pay for the any other costs that related. For example, like the acquisition cost of land, they also need to pay the holding cost of land. I think holding cost of land is not, they need to allocate to pay for the any outgoings or expenses that related to the land before prior to the start of the project. Okay, let us look into the 10.1, land cost, acquiring land by purchasing the suitable site for the proposed development. So they need to acquire land. So calculation, or firstly, the developer will appoint valuation firms to value the property to get the suitable market value, the current market value for the site. For example, within using the per square meter or per square feet basis. Sorry. Okay, for the development land, normally we will use the per square meter or per square feet basis. For agriculture land, we will use per hectare or per acre basis. Okay, and then let's say you have already done your valuation method, valuation using comparison method to obtain the market value of site, and then the value would be in the form of per square feet, RM 120 per square feet. So it depends on the type of the development land. So if the development land has a very good characteristic, so the price would increase as to compare with poor specification of site. So it depends on your adjustment within the comparison method. And also land price or land market value depend on the location. Location, for example, let's say if the site located near the town city area, for example, public and facilities, 10-kilometer radius, so the site will have a higher value compared to the site that located far from the facilities, far from the cities, and etc. So it depends on the location also. Okay, 10.2 is the acquisition cost of land. So the developer need to pay the cost to acquire. For example, for instance, the cost of legal fee. So legal fee, SMP, sale and purchase agreement, and then they have to pay for the estate agents fee. Because some of the developer will employ agents to find a suitable site for them or for the proposed project, and then they have to pay fees. And then they also need to pay for the marketing expenses. Let's say they want to find out, or they need to find a suitable site, and then they will pay for the marketing in newspapers, maybe in the relevant website, and etc. So the cost is between 3% to 5% from the market value or price of the site. Okay, last but not least, they need to allocate holding cost of land. So holding cost of land is the cost that involved when the developer hold the cost prior to the construction of the project. So if, for example, the cost involved is outgoings, taxes, expenses, insurance, quit rent, and etc. Okay, outgoing or expenses incurred by an owner of an investment property. So in this context, development site of any other type pending receipt of rental income from tenants, because the developer will not generate, will not have the specific return to pay for all these costs before the construction of the project. So that's why they need to allocate this cost within the calculation. Okay, or the proceed on the sales of the property to another party. So the formula to estimate the holding cost of land. So you use the amount of $1, 1 plus I percent to the power of NI minus 1. And then you multiply with the market value of site or the land cost that you have calculated at the 10.1. Okay, NI refers to the holding period. So holding period calculation is this one. Let's say your project is 2 years. So you have to add in another 1 year. 1 year meaning 1 year before your construction period start. So you have to hold the land 1 year, and then you have to do a construction after 1 year for 2 years. So the total of the holding period is 3 years. So we assume that the developer will hold the property or the site 3 years. 3 years. And then I% is interest per annum. So when you calculate, you will get the holding cost of land in the form of monetary amount. Okay, last calculation. So these are the, once you have already tabulated your calculation and then you have a working out of, complete working out of the GDV, TDC, and then last but not least, you need to extract all the data that you have calculated and put it inside the viability analysis. Okay, firstly, you need to extract the gross development value calculation. So for in this example, so we get around 30.6 million. And then you have to minus the development costs, total development cost from preliminaries until contingencies. And then you will get around 18.5 million. And then you put also the cost for land costs, acquisition costs, holding cost of land. So these are the example of the calculation. So you include it within the cost as one of within the group, within the cost group, and then you total up every cost that involved. So in respect of this calculation, you will generate around 26.858481 million for the total cost of development. So the next step would be to minus between GDV and total cost of development. So the results would be on the developer's profit of 4 million. So in this project, I managed to estimate around 4.1 million. So is it a viable investment? Is it a viable project? So the next step would be on the analysis based on profit as percentage of GDV and then profit as percentage of TDC. So we need to estimate the viability of the project from the return on investment perspective. So in this context, the profit as percentage of GDV is around 13.43% or 13%, and profit as percentage of TDC is around 16%. So how do you read the results? Is it viable or not viable? So what we can say about this project, it is profitable, but the levels of profit is considered as not viable because it falls within the region that has been given. So for example, profit as percentage of GDV, supposedly we will have to compare with 15% to 25% and above. But in this context, you will get below than the reasonable threshold of ratio. And also return on investment, for every $1 spent, you will generate about 15 or 16 cent. 16 cent. So return on investment of 16% is considered as not very reasonable or viable in terms of ROI, this one. So for every 1 ringgit spent, you generate only 15 cents. Supposedly for a good project, maybe you can generate around 60%, 50%, for example, 40%. For 1 ringgit spent, you can get around 40 cents. For 40 cents return on cost, or on investment of the project. So you have to take note, these are the complete calculation. Once you have identified and once you have calculated all the GDV and also the total development cost item, and then you need to obtain or you need to estimate what levels of profit that you can get from this certain project, from this project.
Doktor,
Yes.
kalau developer tu punya tanah dah beli lama, kira kena termasuk juga ke land cost?
Kena masuk juga.
Kena masuk juga.
Masuk juga land cost because it is part of the cost kan. Part of the cost yang terlibat sebagai developer Okay, sometimes in a certain development project, the joint venture for example, developer joint venture with the owner of land. Tapi we still have to allocate for land cost juga land cost. The current market value of cost for the land tu.
Kiranya holding cost tempoh lama lah sir.
Tak perlu, tempoh dia kita assume 1 year juga.
Ini juga. Okay.
Kita assume 1 year jangan assume sampai 20 tahun ke 10 tahun itu dah tak logik Kita akan assume 1 year lah, 1 year before the project start. Dia akan cover untuk 1 year je. Dia tak cover sampai 2 tahun ke untuk 3 tahun Dia 1 year and then plus development period. Itu dia punya assumption dia 1 year
Okay, doktor.
Okay, thank you. Very good question. Very good question. So these are the final estimation. We will go through a very detailed next week. So we will go to very detailed next week, and I will employ or I will appoint my assistant. I also have one assistant to teach you on the tutorial. So next week saya akan minta dia masuk lah dalam kelas untuk bagi tutorial on the calculation tu. Mungkin ada yang boring tengok muka saya kan hari-hari setiap minggu tengok muka saya mungkin next week saya bagi orang lain lah tengok bagi tutorial. Okay tak?
Boleh doktor.
Boleh So fresh look tapi kita pun baru 4 minggu kan. So we are at the fourth week of the lecture Okay, as a conclusion, so before you conduct any development appraisal calculation using residual method or cash flow method, you need to have all of these items. You need to collect the data on the GDV, and then each of the item in GDV, you need to collect from the several sources. For example, sales of the project, you need to get the data from the property market report, for example, in regards to the pricing. Okay, and then in terms of rental, you need to do a rental survey. You go to comparable property, comparable office building, and then you have to do a certain investigation to search on the rental value, to search on the occupancy rate. Probably you need to do a comparison of service charge, especially if you do a project that require a leasing after completed. So you have to do a several tasks of work. Okay, in terms of total development cost, you can also get all the costs from relevant authorities from the construction cost handbook, and then you have to do a calculation, and you have to make sure all the calculation are correct, accurate, and also reflect the proposed project. You cannot simply, for example, your project is residential, but your cost, you are using the commercial cost, for example. So it is not reflected with the proposed project. So you need to use a suitable amount of costing. And then once you have calculated or you have obtained all the cost and GDV, So you can also do the viability analysis. You extract all the data, you put inside a template, and then you calculate the developer's profit. And the next step would be to identify the viability measurement. You have to do the ratio on GDV and also the ratio from TDC. And then we compare it with the viability measurement threshold or the range of viability between 15 to 25, or for ratio from TDC is between 20 to 50%. So let's say if it falls within the range, we can say that the project is viable. And then last but not least, it is important for the student to understand the concept of the GDV and TDC because it is one of the very popular method when you go into working in valuation firm, for example. You will have to use the residual method for suitable type of property, development project, as a measures to counter check. So normally when we conduct the market value or valuation to identify the market value of property, we will use two methods to counter check whether our value is correct or not correct or incorrect. So residual method will provide a suitable or the counter check mechanism to identify whether the market value calculation is correct within the valuation task that has been given by your superior or your boss or your supervisors and etc. So with that, I will end my session for today. So do you have any question? Okay, next week I will go to the tutorial question to ensure that you understand the concept and then to ensure that you will get or grasp the knowledge on how to calculate using residual calculation, residual method. So hopefully the sharing session today will be beneficial for you, that you can use in your, not only in your examination also during your working period ataupun career advancement or etc. So thank you.
Sir.
Yes, yes.
Example GDV tak ada lah calculation sekali dengan
Nanti saya update. Ni saya baru update tadi.
okay.
Sebab saya tak maulah buka satu lagi file kan. Saya sebenarnya ada satu file lagi untuk Words So untuk mudahkan session ni, saya masukkan dalam slide je lah, so you boleh refer. Nanti saya update kejap lagi the latest calculation ni. So you can get the current notes dalam Google Classroom within the Google Classroom.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you for joining this class. So stay safe and selamat berpuasa. Kita jumpa next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sir.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Doctor.
Welcome.